Now before we begin, I challenge you all to connect. Let's connect. It's a little activity.
So look to the person next to you, someone you may or may not know, and give them a little handshake
You obviously
or
felt
a fist
that
bump or
connection.
a little
You
tap on the
obviously
shoulder.
felt that feeling of contact,
Simple,
that sense
right?
of touch. But now imagine a world where that was taken away from you. A world where something as simple as holding a loved one's hand becomes a daily struggle. Now let's go back in time for a bit.
Growing up, around loved ones with neurological disorders such as Parkinson's disease, I've learned how these challenges not only affect individuals themselves, but these problems tend to ripple out to families and communities as a whole. And in this case, it was my grandmother who had Parkinson's disease. Now for context, Parkinson's disease is a neurological disorder that takes away your ability to move. It causes stiffness, tremors, loss of memory, loss of speech, loss of balance, as well as a reduced sense of touch. Now for these patients, Parkinson's patients often find themselves struggling with cognitive decline, words slipping away, or memories fading, and daily tasks turn into these impossible puzzles.
Now I noticed these problems in my grandmother as time went on, and she eventually resorted to using a walker, and then after that proved to be unsuccessful, it was a wheelchair. She had to use a wheelchair.
And then I noticed that this loss of connection, this loss of feeling, it was so much more than just that neurological condition. It was actually that loss of independence and that loss of connection with the world around her. And now that realization is exactly what pushed me to seek solutions, to create treatments, to create solutions that were not only effective, but also deeply human. Now that we've understood a couple of solutions and more of the background story, let's discuss the problem
Itself. Now the problem is that neurological conditions, they tend to create this emotional weight on families and patients. They do so much more than just limit people's bodies. They isolate people. They rob people of their abilities to interact with the world around them. Now we see this in examples around the world, such as famous actors like Michael J. Fox, for instance, a famous actor from the movie Back to the Future, as you all may know.
Now Michael J. Fox, his energy and his humor once lit up the screens of Hollywood back in the day, but now he struggles with the tremors of Parkinson's disease. Another example would be Stephen Hawking. Everyone knows him, a man whose mind once soared through the cosmos and the world of physics and mathematics, while ALS, a condition similar to Parkinson's disease, slowly took away his ability to move, to speak, and to even breathe on his own.
But beyond these famous figures, it's important to take into account that these neurological conditions affect people in their own homes every single day. As a matter of fact, according to the Parkinson's Foundation, over 1 million people in the United States today are living with Parkinson's disease. And out of that 1 million people, 90,000 people are diagnosed every single year. And when it comes to money, costs can be crazy. Medications alone can cost up to $2,500 per person and over $100,000 for therapeutic surgeries. Pretty expensive, right? But let's think about the fact that neurological conditions, they create this emotional weight, like I said before. But I strongly believe that if we were to connect the fields of science, medicine, as well as humanities, we truly have the potential
to transform lives for the better of our future. Now let's think about potential solutions. But first, let's go back to the very beginning. Now, I've always loved solving problems in the most creative ways possible. As a kid, I was the one sketching inventions in my textbooks and notebooks in the middle of class, sometimes even getting in trouble because of that. But that's actually what helped me realize my love for art and medicine. These two completely unrelated fields, these two completely polar opposite disciplines that truly have the potential to come together to restore what's been lost, those connections.
Now let's think about our very first potential solution, a field in engineering. Now you've all seen prosthetics before, right? Robotic arms, robotic legs. Now traditionally, prosthetics were created with this one goal in mind. Can this device help someone move? Pretty simple goal, right? But what if we were to, let's say, paint a layer of humanity on that? A layer of empathy, a layer of creativity on that design?
What if prosthetics didn't just work, but actually enabled that sense of connection, actually allowed you to feel the warmth of that loved one's touch, to feel that handshake, the fist bump, or the shoulder tap that I asked you all to do earlier? These tiny little acts of connection that we take for granted every single day could mean the absolute universe to Parkinson's patients.
Now we can get on to the solutions. Finally, our first potential solution lies in the field of engineering and science. Devices known as brain-machine interfaces, or BMIs for short. Now, BMIs are essentially machines that recreate the sense of touch. They allow users to feel things, to control devices using the power of their thoughts. Now, I know this may seem like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but these are very real. As a matter of fact, when we spoke about Stephen Hawking earlier and how he lost his ability to speak and move over time, the very machine that he used, the wheelchair, the computer, that translated his thoughts into text, into speech, and ultimately allowing his voice to be heard to the world, is the perfect example of a BMI. Now, BMIs are also seen at the University of Texas at Austin as well. They actually, at the college right now, they recently just developed their very first model of a mind-controlled wheelchair. Pretty cool, right?
And this was actually used for patients. This was actually used in a clinical trial where patients with neurological disorders and mobility impairments were actually able to move around using the power of their thoughts. Another potential solution we see is a concept known as haptic feedback. Now, haptic feedback is a very new but growing field of research, which is essentially the science of recreating that sense of touch, like I mentioned earlier.
So we see haptic feedback in everyday items, such as our smartphones, such as Apple iPhones, Apple Pencils, computers, etc. Those phones that ring early in the morning and you turn them off, or when someone calls you, you feel those vibrations, right? Now those vibrations are exactly what we call haptic feedback.
If we were to implement haptic feedback into those BMIs, into those prosthetics, and give them to people with these conditions, like I mentioned, Parkinson's disease, then we could recreate that sense of touch and allow users to know that, okay, this device is an extension of myself. It's not just this lifeless mechanical tool. Now, an important question we have to ask ourselves every single time we create these innovations is how can we reconnect people with what they've lost? Can these devices truly accomplish that goal? I mean, imagine a world where a prosthetic arm didn't just help you grab onto objects or move around, but actually allowed you to feel that warmth.
Now, why? The biggest question of all. Why do we do this? Why does all of this matter? Why are we actively making the decision to blend these STEM fields with the humanities, these two completely unrelated disciplines? Could they really come together?
They actually can. Because guys, this is about the concept of surviving not being as important as thriving. Life is literally about thriving, not surviving. And we need to understand that, because if we can create these connections, we can do so much more. We can help these people with these diseases connect with the world around them once again.
So that, to me, is the essence of what innovation is about. A world where we can connect these two seemingly unrelated fields and help people come back together again. So whether you're a medical professional or an engineer, a crazy scientist, an aspiring artist, or simply someone who cares, I challenge you to think about how you can contribute to this vision. How can you use your creative side as well as your technical side to create effective treatments that don't just work, that don't just benefit people who need it the most, but also feel deeply human and allow them to connect with the world once again.
Now, the world that we're building today is a world where science and humanity do have the potential to come together, where we can stop focusing way too much on AI or flying cars or machines, and robots all the time. We focus so much on complexity, we forget about simplicity, the simple joys of life.
Let's create that world together again. Thank you.